Well, good morning, everybody, and I do want to thank Transwestern for participating in the panel today, and I also want to thank all the participants that are on the call. Um, I want to introduce our panelists, and they have very impressive bios. So I'll go through some of their the highlights of some of their careers. But again, I want to thank both of them, Charlie Weil and Yesenia Manili, for participating today. And let me start with introducing Charlie Weil. He's Vice President, Tenant Advisory and Workspace Solutions, Office, Healthcare, and Industrial. And Charlie is a commercial real estate agent. He specializes in tenant advisory and workplace solutions, as well as acquisitions and dispositions of office, healthcare, and industrial properties, not only in San Antonio, but in all of South Texas. He has expertise in space utilization, optimization, and planning, and he's helped clients acquire their ideal location while considering culture, vision, and also growth plans. He received the Society of Office of Industrial Realtors SIOR designation in 2015, and SIOR is a leading global commercial real estate association, and he representing the world's top producing agents. There's approximately 3,200 professionals around the globe. And in order to achieve this milestone, Charlie, and any agent, must have met strenuous production and education guidelines, as well as being endorsed by fellow top professionals, which is the ultimate honor, in my opinion, in your industry. So, Charlie received his BA degree in finance and a minor in history from SMU, Southern Methodist University, the Cox School of Business. He and his wife, Brittany, have 2 boys. Welcome, Charlie. And now I want to introduce Yesenia Manili. She's a Vice President, Marketing and Research. Yesenia, she oversees all marketing, advertising, public relations, and market research for Transwestern San Antonio office. She works alongside and closely with leasing and sales producers, senior leadership, senior property management on strategic growth and implementation of San Antonio's marketing, business development, and retention plans. She joined Transwestern in 2012. Her achievements include, and there's a lot of them, so I'll just go through a few of them. National Social Media Social Butterfly Award, 2017 and 2014. San Antonio Team of the Year for 2017. Central Texas Legendary Service Award in 2016. One of the highest awards presented for outstanding service and dedication in achieving the goals and continued success of Transwestern. San Antonio's Outstanding Achievement Service Award in 2015. In the National Best Pitch Design of the Year in 2015. You got to teach us that best pitch there, Yesenia. And the National Marketing Team of the Year in 2014. And there's a lot of others here. She's a lot of professional affiliations and recognitions, Commercial Real Estate Women Crew 2020 President, Eva Rossau Award nominee. And for us here in the San Antonio Chamber, she's a San Antonio Hispanic Chamber Alexander Briseño Leadership Development Program, class of 2016. Yesenia graduated from St. Mary's University in San Antonio, Texas, with a Bachelor of Business Administration and Marketing and General Business. And finally, she designed our Fiesta Medal. So we're very, very happy to have both of you, and I turn it over to you. There you go.
Thank you, Juan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Philip, and the Hispanic Chamber for having us here today. We're really excited to be here with you today. We've got a lot of relevant information and resources to cover. As you may have seen recently, we conducted a poll asking the members to rank in importance a few topics that are relevant to understanding the real estate market and how to make the best decisions to move forward. So with that, today, Charlie and I will be discussing the current market overview, what's going on with the U.S. economy, emerging trends in workplace design, strategies for returning to the workplace, and finally, understanding in case your real estate needs have changed. So let's go ahead. Okay, so I don't know if you guys saw that, but my light's dim. So if I see my arm, you see my arms waving, it's because I'm excited, but I'm also trying to keep the lights on in my office. So with that, we'll go ahead and jump into a current market overview. So starting with the U.S. economy, it's no surprise there's been a severe disruption to the world economy, including the United States. Before this pandemic, most economic indicators were healthy, including employment. In January and February of this year, we had the greatest monthly growth in nearly 2 years in employment. And job growth has taken a significant hit. Everything gained in the first couple months of this year were lost in March alone, and we've seen more decline going into April and May. But that said, we are seeing some employment recovery underway. What you'll notice here, the industries that are most impacted, so where the blue goes all the way down here, you'll see it in leisure and hospitality, and that includes restaurants with about 8.8 million jobs lost since the onset of the pandemic. And in the trade, transportation, and utility sector, we've seen a loss of about 4.3 million jobs. But we are optimistic as we are starting to see some employment recovery underway. Here in leisure, hospitality, and restaurants, we're seeing about 1.5 million jobs come back. And in trade and transportation, we're seeing about 500,000 jobs come back. Within those industries, there are sectors that are worst hit, that have been really impacted by this. So the 6 worst hit sectors being oil field services, department stores, temporary staff, experiential retail, that's no surprise, hotel accommodations, and restaurants and bars. But we are seeing some jobs come back, as I mentioned, in 4 of those categories, but 2 that are still losing jobs are in the oil field services and in accommodations and hotels. Another trend that we're seeing is the rise of the adoption of e-commerce. This pandemic has propelled retailers a few years into the future, and those that have embraced e-commerce are thriving. And in turn, this has also resulted in an increase in demand for logistics space. The ability to be able to touch and feel a product before you purchase it is becoming less and less of a concern as consumers are starting to look at social media, they're looking at the online presence of the brands that they like, they're paying attention to emails that they're receiving. And most notably, the boomer generation. Boomers have embraced e-commerce really out of necessity, mostly because of everything from curbside delivery pickups to grocery delivery, as more are staying home. And especially as we start to see the continue of a rise in COVID cases. These e-commerce and online behaviors are being formed now, and they have been formed over the last few months of the pandemic. So we will likely see this trend continuing. Let's talk about how assets are performing and what we consider to be tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. Tier 1 being the best performing assets right now. The best performing, what we consider, are industrial and multifamily. Nationally, industrial, they're at about 88% in collection of their rents. Industrial is the first asset class that we see bouncing back, specifically because of buyer behaviors, more online retail, more e-commerce. That equates to last mile logistics, behaviors around, home deliveries. And a winner in this is, of course, Amazon. And they recently announced a 442,000 square foot lease in Central Texas, right in Round Rock, actually in a development that Transwestern is doing. So Amazon is a big winner in that space. And somewhat surprisingly, multifamily, performing at about 90% in rent collections. Occupancy in multifamily is still hovering around the pre-pandemic levels, so very high occupancy there, although evictions may begin soon. But again, people are still looking for apartments, same as pre-pandemic. And as more people are starting to work from home, we see the proximity and the need to be near an office less relevant, at least for now. But nationally, we're seeing that suburban multifamily projects that offer more space at a lower price are in high demand. And moving on to tier 2 assets, right now we consider office tier 2 experiencing about 86% rent collections nationally. The next year to year and a half will be challenging, especially for those office owners with dense users and in markets with a lot of call center or back office space. Nationally, core downtowns will take longer to bounce back than suburban areas because of density. But at the end of the day, office isn't going anywhere. We're seeing more flexibility and work from home options. It's questionable whether this will be a long-term solution. as people do prefer offices for various reasons. Obviously, Charlie and I, we're in the office, and Charlie will talk a little bit more about office trends and workplace trends a little later. But lastly, what we consider to be a third tier asset class is retail. Everybody knows retail is definitely hurting. A survey conducted recently of 400 retailers across a portfolio in Texas shows that 70% of them are in trouble with paying their rents. This category is largely dependent on stimulus packages from the federal government, so that's really of no surprise. But the next 2 months will be telling. The next 2 months will probably be the most important 2 months, just as we said that maybe even 2 months ago. But as economies start to reopen and we receive new updates on a daily basis, we have early optimism because of regionally based recoveries, especially the southern region of the United States. It's showing economic recovery in states that have reopened. With COVID cases rising, especially in Texas, the next couple of months will be important as we see where the bottoming out will happen. As I talked about rent collections earlier, for industrial, multifamily, office, and retail, they have been better than expected, but it's largely due to Paycheck Protection Program, PPP loans that we've all heard of. But we are optimistic going forward as technology is helping us recover. And it's still yet to be seen what the next government program will be like. Moving on locally, what we have seen in the San Antonio market is a dramatic activity in sublease activity. So notably from big users, including USAA, Medtronic, and Marriott, as well as a number of other users. But these companies aren't going anywhere, as they embrace work from home policies or pull back on growth projections. They are making these decisions. And the give backs of space will result in changes in occupancy and potentially eventually in market rates. But a sharp rise in sublease activity is a leading indicator of the shift from a landlord to a tenant's market. Locally, rates are holding for now, depending again on the product type and the quality. We'll see how that goes. But we are seeing an increase in concessions, and we're starting to see tenants requesting and landlords are actually granting short-term leases and renewals, along with requests for rent relief, increases in landlords providing ready-to-lease spaces and tenant improvement dollars. Retail landlords are hungry. Office landlords may be getting antsy. And as we start to see an increase in vacancy overall for those two sectors, for retail and office respectively, the most noted trend overall being that when possible, tenants are doing what they can to defer major real estate decisions, as indicated by the preferences for short-term leases and renewals. A bright light, and the exception of businesses that have benefited from the shift in those consumer behaviors. Again, not everybody is affected equally, and some are doing better than before. We've seen some of our own clients needing to expand. But at the end of the day, businesses, a lot of business owners face an uncertain economy and struggle to balance immediate needs with unknown long-term effects. So what we see today may not be what we see tomorrow. So staying up to date on those trends is really key. And so with that, that wraps it up for a market snapshot. With that, I'll hand it over to Charlie to walk us through emerging trends in the workplace.
Thank you, Cynthia, for that update, and knowing that that is very fluid and changing daily. So we really appreciate you kind of keeping tabs on that and keeping us up to speed. So as indicated by the survey put out, there was a lot of interest in understanding what some of the trends were moving forward in various industries. We're going to start with some more current topics and then kind of end with a little bit more hypothetical, long-term speculative assumptions. But where are we now is key. Obviously, with no surprise, there is still a significant amount of uncertainty out there in the market as to what the future will hold for businesses and tenants. As such, many businesses are deferring investing significant capital in their spaces at this time trying to wait and see what's going to happen to make those decisions. With the exception of critical industries, um, uh, most companies are electing to continue their work from home policies. Given the recent surge we are seeing in cases, businesses, and the fact that there's kind of some acceptance that this may all linger longer than we'd like, we're seeing businesses need to go ahead and start considering maybe more long-term or substantial changes within their workplace to create those more healthy and safe spaces for the employees once they return. One example would be deciding what to do with your workstations. That's always a problem area, particularly in offices that have density. As you can see, in this example here, a pretty standard, kind of fairly dense, modern cubicle or benching setup. Obviously doesn't really work in today's environment, needing 6 feet of space. So we're seeing companies need to kind of make a decision as to how they're going to move forward. There's obviously a pretty, no surprise, there's kind of we're seeing a differentiation between what is available to larger companies and what's available to smaller and medium-sized businesses. Larger companies with bigger budgets and more staff to analyze and make proper decisions may be more likely to make more substantial changes and more permanent investments in their furniture or offices overall, as we can see here in potentially option number 3, the reconfiguration. Whereas small and medium-sized businesses just simply have more constrained budgets, they have less staff, they are using all their bandwidth to deal with all the challenges and issues that are coming at them from directions across the board, and maybe and we're seeing kind of forced to go the retrofit and adaptation route and just kind of putting whatever they can together to create these safe workspaces and environments. Not surprisingly, the next thing we've seen a lot of is technology being more and more key these days. We have seen significant increases in the investment in cloud and IT infrastructure as it relates to work from home demands, be it some companies completely overhauling what they're using to shift to different platforms, or businesses just simply allowing employees to upgrade Zoom accounts, get Office 365 upgrades and so forth. But one way or the other, companies are having to adapt to make sure that their employees who are working from home can be as productive as they can where they are. These investments do allow for better productivity in the work from home environment, but it's likely that these investments also just simply create more flexibility in the long term, hopefully once we're past this, and will inherently make the workplace and the employee experience more flexible. So we do anticipate these investments in technologies to be here for the long term. So the $1 million question, the question I get most from all my clients, from the investors, from any armchair expert I come across is work from home here to stay? Is office done? Everybody's going to work from home. A recent study by Gensler Architects, one of the more notable architects in the country, indicates that answer is not necessarily. According to their survey, 88% of respondents wanted to spend at a minimum 1 to 2 days in an office environment. The vast majority of those, 70%, for the most part, wanting to work out of an office full time or the majority of the time, leaving only 12% of respondents actually desiring a true work from home environment. There's obviously challenges with that, and we do assume that 12% includes the current work from home workforce, which there is one, which is estimated at 3 to 5%. So why do people want to come back to the office? Well, the first one and the most obvious is obvious: people. We are social creatures. We're social beings. We like interaction with people, and that interaction, particularly in the workplace, allows us to be more collaborative, to share ideas more freely, to work with other and have those interactions that are important to companies to develop, to be successful and develop culture and so forth. Technology is also a big reason to come back in the office. In reality, it's just not practical for businesses to set up all the technology that their employees need within everybody's individual home. There's just logistics challenges with that. There's certain technologies that that can't be provided in everybody's home. So there's going to need to be the need to come into the office, either necessity or convenience, to do so. Much like we're sitting here in our office, where it's much easier to work with dual screens and all the things and the printers that we have here available. We're certainly more productive here than working on a small laptop at home. So that's something that will bring companies back. So kind of shifting gears to more hypothetical, more long-term potential changes coming out of this, design-wise and function-wise. We could potentially see desire to have more tenants and occupiers have more access to open air areas, more stairwell access to avoid those crowded elevators and choke points, which naturally could kind of shift towards a desire for more suburban mid-rise office versus very dense high rises where you have to spend a lot of time going up and down elevators, interacting, and with close proximity to other people. No surprise, improved air quality and ventilation, we think, is already being talked about now and implemented where it can, but will have a larger role moving forward. And the reality is that even pre-COVID, the de-densification of office spaces was already underway. Employers were figuring out that you can only put so many cubicles in a space and get so dense before you saw a loss in productivity of those employees. And even pre-COVID, it was starting to go the other way. We were starting to see more private offices and the like. So given the need to have more space per employee to meet these 6-foot standards, we anticipate will not only continue that trend, but likely accelerate it. And with that, there could be a increased need for flexible areas and collaboration areas within the space that could be easily repurposed to kind of adapt to different environments. If, for instance, a collaboration area that you can use to kind of meet and have that culture once we can get back and do those things more readily. But if something shifts, we have another incident or another pandemic in the future, it's planned such that those areas can be repurposed and reutilized to create less density or to create a special use for some other challenge that companies need. So flexibility is key. As far as design is overall, we anticipate there being more focus on function versus form moving forward. Some examples as far as design and furniture, for instance, would be something like here. It's not the best looking cubicle. We do anticipate still better looking products coming out, but in the future, modular elements and pre thought through elements with furniture that can go in, that could be installed in a more protective, defensive fashion like this, but is already pre-designed to quickly remove those and then move back towards a more connected and social free environment when time is once we get to those times, and back and forth if that need comes in the future. Obviously, technology such as touchless controls, automatic doors, automatic hand washers, touchless elevator controls are already out there, but we expect to see lots more of those. And then in the warehouse and distribution realms, there was, automation is always something that's talked about, but we do anticipate seeing an acceleration of automation in those products, not only just to reduce that that person-to-person contact, but for potential future incidences or outbreaks, they could really help bolster the supply chains and make them more reliable in case of a future pandemic. The last kind of concept that we'll touch on briefly is the creation or the move towards offices to become more of a culture hub. This relates to work from home at some point. As we discussed, we don't anticipate work from home taking over office space overall and then not being there by any means. But there will likely be an increase in the amount of work from home employees that are out there. And as such, it's likely that the workplace itself will become more of a culture hub and a gathering place for those employees to gather, allowing the employers themselves, that physical space to bring those people in who may not be coming into the office and differentiate themselves. The culture of a company is really what allows businesses to do that, to create differentiation, to recruit top talent, retain that talent, develop and promote brand awareness and such. And really the reality is that it's difficult to create culture for an employee that may be sitting at their house one day, can log off of that company's website, the next day fire up on a new company's website from their home, and there's just really no place to create culture and create that stickiness with employees. So we do think that culture is even more important as we see that continue. As we discussed, collaboration and swing spaces can provide those employers that kind of those areas to get together, create those culture creation scenarios, but then could be flipped towards other more functional purposes if that is no longer allowed for any reason. So the bottom line is, there's a lot of decisions to be made in the future, but whatever decision a company needs to make moving forward, we feel it's prudent that where possible, you maximize your flexibility moving forward, not only for this environment, but for any future challenges or changes as your business may face unrelated to where we are now. More simply put, if you have multiple options to decide what to do with, even if one may have a little bit of an incremental cost above the other, it may make sense to invest in options where you can get additional benefits, flexibility, and not simply react to where we are now, because we will get through this and move on past this here, hopefully sooner than later. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Yesenia.
Thank you, Charlie. So again, another important topic, how do we return to the workplace? Transwestern, we've put together thoughtful resources and a framework to get back to the workplace. Of course, the decision to return is one that isn't taken lightly and deserves a well thought out plan. We've developed a master plan to reopen our own offices across the country. We're in 34 markets. Again, using health and legal considerations top of mind. We've structured our expectations around 4 major themes, including determining when to return, preparing the workplace, establishing protocols for maintaining a healthy workplace, and communicating with our team members about their return. As far as determining when, as you organize and make your decision to return to the workplace, take into account internal and external factors that will impact your decision. I'm not going to go into these details because we've all heard the CDC guidelines, but we have a framework, best practices in place that we're happy to share and help you as you develop your own plan to return back to the workplace. We're more than happy to share that as a resource and kind of guide you through those best practices and be that resource for you. So what I'd like to do at this point, Philip or Sophie, if you would come bring up our first poll for our audience. Our first poll question being, do you have a return to the workplace plan? And we'll keep it simple, just yes or no. Okay, as we gather the results of that, we'll keep moving through this presentation. Okay, so in preparing the workplace, here's a few just actionable items and strategies for now, keeping a priority of density, geometry, and division. What you want to do is create space. So we've all heard the 6-foot rule, a minimum of 6 feet between people. And in some cases in dense environments, we've seen that some of our clients, as some of their people have a flex schedule, they may opt to use every other cubicle to maintain that spacing. And if that's not feasible or achievable, long-term measures such as separating desks or adding space divisions, movable screens can also be implemented. And in some of those scenarios where space limitations make those solutions difficult, we've been told that height also helps. So implementing the highest boundary possible above your workspace and also on all exposed sides of your workspace. Additionally, it's recommended to meet in more open space and reduce as many of those shared spaces as possible. Do we have the results of that poll that we can share, Philip?
Yes, Yesenia. It looks like of the poll, 84% said that they do have a return to workplace plan, and 16% said that they don't.
Okay, awesome. It's great that so many are prepared, and I feel like the more that we share resources and information, the better we'll all be. For those that don't, we are happy to provide that resource and be here to help guide during that time. I wanted to share an example of what we've done in our own office. We've set protocols on pre-arrival, how to handle the number of people in the elevator lobby, how many visitors are allowed in our reception area, you know, keeping cleanliness top of mind, wayfinding. You'll notice here on our floor plan, you'll see a bunch of blue arrows that detail the traffic flows that we expect in our space as we navigate through the office. And you'll also notice red dots on our floor plan. So these are in our common areas. So here's in the kitchen, we've got 6 seats where people can eat, but we've blocked off 3 of them and also set a limit of no more than 4 people in our kitchen, for example. Our huddle rooms and our conference rooms also have blocked out seating to allow for that social distancing. As you can see, Charlie and I are both physically in our offices. We're not wearing our face masks in our private offices, but you can bet that if we're going out in the hallway, we're going to the restroom, you can bet that we're wearing our face mask, and you've got to talk louder when you're wearing your face mask. But anytime that we walk out into common areas or our conference rooms in the kitchen, we are wearing our face mask and keeping that distance. We've also got extra hand sanitizing stations around the office and within our building, addressing any kind of high touch point areas, making sure that those are sanitized throughout the day, and then everyone is responsible for their own personal work areas. Again, establishing those protocols and protecting the workplace is really important to help people feel better about coming into the office and creating that healthy workplace for our people. Other factors that we've taken into consideration are, what do we do if somebody gets sick? You know, notifying leadership and keeping that open communication is very important. Making sure that we hold each other accountable for wearing our mask and abiding by the physical distancing rules that we've set. And even around travel plans. I mean, we want our team members to take vacations and be safe. And if anybody is, for example, if they're traveling out of the country, we are requiring that they self-quarantine and work from home for 2 weeks just to be safe. But again, we are reducing and addressing any of those high touch point areas, such as doors, our kitchens, storage for office supplies, and touch screen displays. And finally, communication, right? Communicating with team members about the return of the workplace is so important. Rolling out the communication plan is important. Our people and their families are priority. They're priority number 1, number 2, number 3. Understanding that every team member has their own unique circumstances around their family with regards to caring for, you know, elderly, caring for other family members, caring for their own children. So electing to return to the workplace for us is completely voluntary. We've ensured that our team members understand our plan, and we have them acknowledge the workplace plan electronically before they're able to come in. And before COVID, we had at our full occupancy, we have about 22 people that are in our corporate office, and we currently have about half that are returning back to the office full-time. Personally, I worked from home for I think about 8 weeks, and because of some of those challenges of the technology, I felt better about just being in the office in my own kind of private area. So communication is definitely important. And that wraps up returning to the workplace. I'll hand it back over to Charlie to wrap us up on understanding your options if your real estate needs have changed.
Thank you, Cindy, for that. And for anybody attending here, if y'all do want any of the resources mentioned before, a little bit later here, we're going to be putting up our contact information. Please feel free to reach out to Yesenia or I if y'all want examples of plans or want to discuss any of those things in further detail. So lastly, and real quickly, we'll run through understanding what your options are if your real estate needs have changed because of COVID, or for really any other reason for that matter. First off, the main two factors that influence your options are primarily timing and urgency. Timing being the amount of time left on your lease in most cases, and often has a direct correlation as to what options are available to you. And then urgency, essentially how much is the need for your change in office space actually affecting your bottom line? Are you experiencing a significant loss in opportunity costs, for instance, that would rapidly and quickly be outweighed by the increase in real estate costs you may achieve? Maybe maybe a scenario where it's okay to be a little bit more aggressive and grow your business instead of worrying too much about incremental costs in real estate? Or is it more of a want than a need, and it's something that, though you may have a year or two left on your lease, it's probably not worthwhile financially to make some sort of dramatic change and just wait out that decision. Before we move on into those specifics, and really to make sure y'all are still awake and with us more than anything, we wanted to do one more quick poll, which Philip will put up to have an understanding of how many of our participants here have experienced some sort of change in their business and their real estate needs, particularly as it relates to what we've gone through. It doesn't have to be a big one. Anything would count, but we're curious to see how many of our attendees have seen those changes. So we'll give it a minute or two, and whenever that's available, Philip or Sophie, if y'all could throw that up. But while folks are filling that out, just want to move quickly through what options are out there. Most of these are no surprise to anybody, but hopefully we can give you a little bit better understanding of where they're appropriate or what to use, and some details and nuances in each. But the most obvious in a real estate decision is a move. Do I move my real estate to somewhere else? This is typically most appropriate if you're looking for either an upgrade or downgrade in the quality of the asset that you're in, for either increased presence or to save money on the bottom line on your real estate costs. The key here is you pretty much always have to, in most cases, have to be towards the end of your lease for that to be appropriate. Obviously, the next being a renewal or a reconfiguration of your space. Renewals very obviously appropriate when everything's working fine within the footprint within you're in. You don't necessarily need a dramatic change, but it is, and everything's working fine, but it's definitely recommended. And we see this too often that folks are happy with their space. They don't have any real needs or changes, so they just kind of take what's given to them. And we definitely recommend even on any given renewal that tenants go out and test the market, understand what your options are, ideally gather other potential proposals or terms from other buildings to make sure that you're getting the deal that you should be getting where you are. And that's, in many cases what we'll do is use those alternatives to leverage where you are to get you the best deal possible. Looks like, as according to our poll, about 50% of the people on this call have experienced changes in their real estate needs because of COVID. So that's no surprise, and a little bit of a surprise, right down the middle, but that is a substantial portion of folks out there. So it just kind of underlines what we're dealing with here and the importance of kind of understanding what's going on. So get back on track here. As far as reconfiguration, moving through that real quickly, that's essentially any time that you're just going to make moves and changes within your own space. That can be either walls or furniture, walls or furniture. If you're getting to walls and needing to actually make physical construction changes to your space in particular, and making substantial investments like that, regardless if you have term on your lease or not, it's generally recommended or a good idea to at least approach your landlord or get your agent to approach your landlord on your behalf to inquire if there's a scenario where they can participate in those costs, and often in exchange for extension of your lease term or something like that, what we call in the industry as a blend and extend, which we'll touch more in the next option. But downsizing your space, if you need to downsize your space, that obviously can be done at the end of your lease term in most cases, assuming the landlord will allow it. Otherwise, you're looking at a move to downsize. But it can also be, as discussed, done, and a lot of tenants maybe don't think about this or don't utilize this as much as it could be. If you have a need, particularly if it would help your business and your bottom line now, approaching your landlord early and using that kind of blend and extend approach to either receive that rent, that reduction in space in return for potentially extending out that lease, committing to the landlord, but they're giving you the relief you need now. It could be also rent relief, or again, tenant improvement dollars to put towards your space, whether it be to make that downsize happen or reconfigurations needed when you do downsize. Expanding, if it's an option, is much easier. Landlords are usually pretty happy to lease you more space if they have it available. I think the only comment we'll add there is that if you do have those expansion needs and you don't think something's available for you, it's generally recommended that you at least inquire, get your agent or inquire with the landlord, let them know that you have that need, because oftentimes we find they may be privy to something that you may not be, and there may actually be an expansion option available to you that you didn't think of or weren't aware of, and they can help facilitate that. The last thing we'll talk about is sublease, and it's really kind of your worst case scenario option. It's generally most appropriate when none of the above options will suit your needs. It's kind of that last resort, and typically applicable when you need to give back a substantial portion of your space, or you're not utilizing a substantial portion of your space, or you don't need your space altogether at all anymore. And that's when you would put that out to market for another tenant to come lease from you as if you were the landlord. There's a lot of inherent risk that comes with that in being a landlord, in addition to the kind of the negatives and the hassle that it is in dealing with that, making sure you're receiving their rent and rent's getting paid on time. It's typically expensive. There is generally you're not going to get 100% of what you're paying to your landlord in rent, so there'll be a reduction made to entice the tenant to take that sublease versus leasing a direct space. There's also potentially commissions or other costs associated with getting a space ready or demising it, splitting it so that it can be ready for that sublease tenant. And there's also fees sometimes that the landlords charge to do that, to actually allow you to sublease the space. So if you own your own real estate, that is, obviously there's a lot of benefits that come with owning your own real estate. One of the big negatives is typically a lesser amount of flexibility. It's much harder to exit that than simply moving lease spaces and buildings. A lot of times if you're occupying the whole thing or the majority of it, or you have another tenant, you can be confined within your own real estate. So if you own your own real estate and you need to make that change, it's generally recommended that you get somebody to help you analyze whether it's more appropriate to hold it and lease that space, particularly if it's all or part of the space, and use that income as to help your business. There's a lot of you have to be a landlord to do that and take those responsibilities on, or maybe it's more appropriate to go ahead and actually dispose of that asset, either move into another lease space or purchase another building that's more suitable for your needs. Use those proceeds to put back into your business or to help you spur on other ventures. So with that, we just want to say that it's, with all this going on, it's really important to embrace the change that we're seeing and move beyond that crisis mode and crisis management that so many of us have kind of been forced to live in for so long. The reality is that we can help y'all put together plans when it comes to your real estate, and we can, we can all together put forth plans to get out of this, instill confidence in our businesses, and move forward in these uncertain times with diligence and positivity. So with that, last thing we'll say is that, given what we just talked about being very kind of generalities, everybody's situation is very unique and truly different. And the reality is it has to be looked at a deeper level. We're going to put up Q&A here in a second, but if anybody has questions about their specific situation, we have our contact information up here. We'd love to take those maybe offline, because that can often be a much longer conversation and discussion, and a need for additional information to kind of get y'all meaningful answers and resources. But we're happy to do it for anybody who has a need, just have simple questions. We're here and we'll make ourselves available.
With that, Philip and Juan, Sophie, thank you again for having us on to present this relevant and timely information. Again, we're here to answer any questions, and happy to provide resources.
Yesenia, Charlie, thank you both so much for all the useful information. It looks like we did receive a comment in the Q&A. It's from one of our attendees. It says, locally, companies who are discussing their plan to return to the workplace have a resource that can help them review their space. No matter the size of company, they can call WITIGS for assistance. And they left a number. They've been conducting go-to meeting calls to review resources and possible solutions for San Antonio companies. They don't charge for consultation because they are assisting businesses in their time of uncertainty. So I'm assuming that they're assisting different businesses with their office configurations as it pertains to office furniture.
Yeah, and there's other resources, architects and so forth out there if you need to look more, to more changes involving walls and so forth. So there are a number of resources out there, and WITIGS is great. If y'all need any further directions with any of those things, we'd be happy to provide additional details. All right.
Okay, and as Yesenia mentioned, we'll be sending out this information via email with a link of the recording and the contact information for Charlie and Yesenia, so you all can reach out directly. But it looks like we got another comment from one of the attendees. A great presentation, Yesenia and Charlie. Thank you.
All right. Well, we really appreciate the time, and of course, we're here for anybody that needs help or information or wants to get their hands on any of these resources that we talked about at any time. Just shoot us an email. We'll take care of you. That will wrap it up.
All right.
We really appreciate everybody's help on this, and hope everybody has a great rest of the day and week, and appreciate your involvement.
Well done. Thank you.
Stay safe and wear your mask.
Thank you all. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.